So I'm here with Megan from the Dr. Konstantin Frank Wineries. Let's talk a little bit about Riesling. I always love to serve with the schnitzel, like good glass of Riesling. You guys are focusing mainly on Riesling. There's a great wine.
So yes, schnitzel and Riesling is a classic pairing. Absolutely perfect pairing. So we do 8 different styles of Riesling here at Dr. Frank's. So Riesling is one of the most transparent grape varieties in terms of seeing where it's grown and where it's planted. So on this property here, we have a lot of shale in the soil, which produces a nice kind of minerality in the wine. Riesling is one of the most versatile in terms of food pairings, so we have a lot of different styles to work with. The different styles range drastically. So we make a traditional method sparkling Riesling, made in the Mette Champenois. So it's very much an artisanal product, so a lot of hand labor goes into it. So it's almost like each bottle has its own story to tell, which I think is one of the most beautiful things about sparkling wine made in this method.
We're focusing on the Northern European wine grapes. Our climate it's a cool climate. We're up in the northern part of upstate New York, so it's similar to Germany, Alsace, Austria, northern France. So the grape varieties from those regions actually do best here. Gewürztraminer is a good example. Gruner Veltliner, an Austrian wine grape. Chardonnay does well. And this area is just a paradise. You know, the water is so clean that the homes on the shore use it as their drinking water. The lake is loaded with salmon and lake trout. We had so much fun. My 2 cousins and I, we grew up hunting and fishing.
So you have all those European varieties here. You just brought them over, planted them here, and voila, I have new grape varieties.
I wish it was that easy. Unfortunately, there was a lot of attempts made for hundreds of years unsuccessfully. And one of the earliest pioneers was Thomas Jefferson. He loved Bordeaux wines, got cuttings of grapevines from his friends in France, planted them at his estate in Virginia, and within a few years they died. And the reason is that throughout the eastern US, there was a pest in the soil called phylloxera. It was a type of root louse. And this pest would eat the roots of the European vines when they planted them. And so Konstantin brought techniques with him that worked in Europe, and he, along with other scientists, came up with a technique called grafting, whereby they took cuttings of the wild American vine to serve as the roots, and they grafted them onto the European vine. And thus they were able to grow these European vines in soils that had the phylloxera. It elevated the quality of wines tremendously. We're going from Concord to Riesling. I mean, what a huge improvement in quality. And B, it helped protect the environment. We weren't trying to kill the pest with dangerous pesticides. We were coexisting with the pest. I'm going to show you some of the old vine trunks here, and also the graft union. These old vines are a real treasure. They were planted in the late 1950s. They're now among the oldest in the United States. You see this bulge right above the soil, and then the thin trunk below that. And that bulge is the marriage between the European vine, everything above the soil, and the Native American resistant rootstock below the soil. You can see that thinner trunk below the bulge. That's the resistant rootstock to protect the roots from the native pest called phylloxera. So we follow the same practice as in Europe of not using irrigation, just relying on natural rainfall.
It's very much the quintessential immigrant story. Everything sort of came crashing down after World War II, when the family was forced to flee. So it was a very difficult time, basically starting over. And they came through Ellis Island in 1951. So it was Konstantin, his wife Eugenia, and 3 children. So he had a very long career in Ukraine. He was very well respected, within the realm of winemaking and managing vineyards. And Konstantin was only able to bring his viticulture books. Really, nobody else was able to bring any possessions.
He started out as a dishwasher at a Horn and Hardart cafeteria in New York City. And that was very traumatic for him, very depressing, to take such a step backward in his career, but it was a great way to start learning English. Mm-hmm. He faced death many times throughout his life. He had to struggle, and I think this made him a person that could take on challenges. And you often find this in a pioneer's personality, that they have such strong conviction that when experts tell them, no, it can't be done, they take that on as a challenge. In other words, that fuels them even more. And that was the case with him. He did research, he wanted to get back into the industry. And in New York, in upstate New York, Cornell University has this wonderful viticulture research area.
So he called them up without prior notice and just explained his credentials, asked for a position. And they sort of politely said, well, I'm sorry, we don't have anything available that fits your skills. He, the next day, booked a bus ticket from New York City to Geneva, which then took 11 hours. So Eugenia packed in 3 sandwiches for the road, and he took off to Geneva in hope that he could convince them in person to give him a job at the research station. And right there beside him was his wife, Eugenia. So she was an incredibly important figure. She came from very humble beginnings. She was the one to really push him to go forward for his PhD and complete his studies in viticulture.
The scientists thanked him for his time and said basically they didn't have an opening for his position. Mm-hmm. However, they did have kind of a menial worker position if he was interested. And so he took that, things like hoeing blueberries, and it wasn't a very skilled position, but it was a start. And then a few years later bought the farm, and that's where he started his own vineyards. This was way back in 1958. Konstantin really had to struggle because everything he had to start from scratch. There was nothing here.
This was land that really wasn't as valuable to many people, but for Konstantin, it had a lot of significance viticulturally. He was very attuned to what he was looking for in terms of a good slope, proximity to the lake, soil type, and was really trying to figure out what worked here. And then in 1962, he had his first vintage at the age of 61.
Wow. So he was basically a scientist trying to see what works in this kind of rougher climate.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it is quite harsh here, especially in the winters.
Mm-hmm.
To work alongside him was his wife, Eugenia. And she worked in the vineyards, grafting with him, pruning. So she was an integral force in the starting of the winery back in the early days. So we had Hilda, who was my great aunt, and she was our first bookkeeper. So she really helped keep everything in check and all the finances accounted for. We also had my great aunt Lena. She's actually the only child of Konstantin still alive today. She's in her 90s. She was the one to keep everyone together, sort of the glue of the family. Margaret was another very important woman within the company, very much a part of building the brand and building the history for our winery here. And I was always frustrated that their voices were never heard, their stories were never told. And so today we're paying tribute to them by taking the best plots of land that we have and devoting the wine to them.
So it's great to see not only the winery prospering in its 4th generation, but the whole industry prospering, is really satisfying. And I think Konstantin is probably looking down from the heavens with a big smile on his face that, you know, all his hard work and sacrifice has grown beyond his wildest dreams.
Ladies and gentlemen, good grape variety are not good enough for Americans. You Americans deserve only excellence.